Right. So, yeah, introduction to advanced reporting, I've actually called it, but it is SQL. So I'm Bernard Scaife, data migration specialist at PTFS Europe. Check that works. So, yeah, many of us have dabbled in the alchemy of MySQL. Even if it's very basic, if you've got Koha, you will probably have done something, even if it's just as simple as that. You've made a little Koha report, select something from something else, where something or other, some criteria applies. And certainly when I started doing this, I would be doing that without really understanding what I was doing. As long as it was bringing back something for me, that was all good, and you can get so far with that. And of course, there is also the Koha reports wiki page, which you've probably also been to. There's loads of brilliant reports there that you can pick up. You can copy and paste them, you can put them in Koha and run them. So that's all good as well. But sometimes you'll come across a bit of a problem. You'll pick up one of these reports and you'll find perhaps it doesn't work. And that's possibly because over time, Koha is changing. The database itself changes. There's new fields, there's new tables, and you might get an SQL error and you'll think, oh, well, that's a shame, that doesn't work anymore. And this is the point where having a little bit more SQL knowledge can just get you a bit further forward. And it's often an easy fix that allows you to actually move forward on that. So what I'm going to be doing today is talking a little bit about a MySQL course that we've been delivering. We've delivered to a number of customers, as well as giving you a little sort of insight into what we do. But what we've been doing in that course is to try not to put the cart before the horse. But I couldn't find a picture of that, so I'm afraid you've just got to have the horse in front of the cart. So we kind of, if I look back at when I was learning this, I would have really appreciated somebody just saying, you know, this is what a database is. What's a relational database? You know, you often get people saying, I've got a spreadsheet database, and the spreadsheet is not a database, but nobody tells you why not. So one of the things I've done in the course is to say, well, this is what a relational database is. And we're going to actually look at designing one and looking at what tables and fields are and the relationships and all these kind of this terminology that's surrounded, and you're not quite sure, well, when they're talking about a primary key or a key field, what are they talking about? Because it just gives you that grounding that when you go on to getting it a bit more advanced, it just makes the whole thing a lot easier. So yeah, you could look at, well, why might you want to do this? Why would you even want to go a bit more advanced? Well, the first thing is, as I've just said, you pick up that Koha report from the wiki page and it doesn't quite work. It gives you a little error message and you think, well, I don't know what that means. With a little bit of knowledge, it's very often something very simple. And you say, oh, I see where that's not working now. And if you've got this little bit of knowledge, you can go in and just make a few tweaks, save it, and then it works. So you can sort of help yourself there. But also, instead of those queries just being this huge blob of text that you copy and paste in, and you think, well, I don't really have any understanding of what that's doing, you can start to be able to read the queries and just sort of say, oh, I see what it's doing now. It's starting with this, and then it's building a bit on here, and it's doing this. And that allows you to have more kind of understanding of what the query is doing and how it's doing it. You also can find better ways of writing queries. So often at the beginning, when you're first doing this, you just got to launch in and start typing a load of stuff, and then you press run and it doesn't work and you get frustrated. So one of the things we look at is the way that you can sort of validate what you're doing as you go along and kind of go more in a piecemeal fashion. So we'll do one little bit and see, okay, I understand that works. Now I'm going to use that fragment and I'm going to incorporate it in something a little bit bigger. And then we start building it up and you end up with something and you think, oh, I've written one of those really long queries that nobody understands. But this time it actually works. So that's one of the things that we can look at. So the only way to do this is, I'm not really going to be doing this today, but it is real-time examples. So the course that I've delivered is that we do a little bit of PowerPoint, but mainly we're sitting there watching me actually write and run the queries and make the mistakes and then fix the mistakes. So you can see that in action, because it's quite useful to just watch that, because it shows you how to sort of do it. And then I think a really powerful reason for doing this is if you can get really sort of impactful reports that are of use to your organization, they can be a bit of a game changer, really. So I don't know, just picking up an example off the cuff, you might want to sort of try and work out some of the trends in the use of various parts of your collection in order to make an argument to the management for either retaining or increasing funding or whatever it might be. And being able to walk into those meetings with those reports that you've been able to create might make the difference between you getting that funding or retaining that funding, or the management saying, yeah, but I don't see any evidence here. You can just take the evidence in with you. So MySQL, you might start off and think, well, it can be quite a dry topic, but it can also be a really, really useful skill to have. So basically, when we start on the sort of advanced part of the course, when you've got the building blocks, I'm going to go through various things that we look at. And one of the first things we look at are these things called functions. And basically, a function is a very simple thing. It takes some data as an input, it does a transformation on that, and it comes out different, and that's the output. So here's a list of a few of hundreds and hundreds of MySQL functions that there are available. You can't do them all in like 3 hours, even in a course, but you can. There's often a function for almost everything you want to do, and you kind of build these into your skill set as you get more experienced. So looking at that top one upper, if I was to put some text in that was in mixed case or just camel case, like my name, and then I was to put it inside those brackets, it would transform it and it would come out all in uppercase. Same for lower, same for all of those that you can see there. In string, instra, looks for the position of a particular character within the string or the field that you're looking in, and that can be useful as well. Replace, that looks for some text that is within or maybe within a field you're looking at, and says replace that with something else that you give it as a. So what you put inside the functions here, inside the brackets here, they're called parameters. So you might only have one parameter, or you might have a number of parameters, and they're sort of separated by commas. So that we sort of get into a bit of a language around that. And concat, which is one of my favorites, is sort of joining things together, concatenating them, so that things that start as perhaps two fields, you can string them together as one piece of text. We also look a little bit more advanced at this sort of nesting concept of functions. It's basically combining functions together. So in this one, say you've got an author, and the author is Scaife, Bernard in the normal sort of format in a system. You can use a function called substring to say, basically take the first letter or the starting character in that string and go on for a certain number of characters. So I could have put, instead of the purple bit, just go on for 5, and it would have just done SCAIF, if that's 5, and that's all it would have given me. But clearly, if you can imagine a list of authors, everybody's surname's a different length. So that's no good me using 5, because it might work if your surname happens to be 5 characters long, but it won't if it's 10 characters long. So what we're doing here is we're combining two functions to get a bit more power. So this instra function, as I said before, it's looking for the position of the comma in Scaife, Bernard. So I don't know what that is at the top of my head, but it's going to give a number. So it replaces that with whatever the comma is for every single row. So effectively what it means is out of that author field, you will bring out just the surname from that author field, which might be what you want for a certain report. You just want the surname. Or you do it another way, you could bring out just the first name. So that's just a little example of sort of combining these functions. We then look at some of the grouping things that are possible. One of the things when you're learning about MySQL is that you don't know what you're missing. In terms of, you've got a nice report on the left-hand side there that says, I just want home branch barcode from the items, please, and I want you to group them by biblio number. And it says main, 3 billion or whatever, and 1, great, green, that. And you can't see immediately from that there might actually be lots and lots of barcodes associated with that item at main. And in fact, if you look in the right-hand table, which is the database itself, you can see that in fact this main one has 3 items attached to it, 3001, 2, and 3. So you can use a function called group concat to mean that in your reports, you would be seeing main and then all the barcodes together, rather than just the first one it happened to come across in the table. So part of the thing we look at, and part of the thing that becomes clear to you as you work with MySQL over time, is you get that sort of sneaky feeling that, oh, hang on a minute, I might be missing some data here. You get a bit more familiarization with the data. And the training is something that gives you some of that, but there's sort of no kind of substitute really for experience. As you go along and you write more of these queries, you get that, hang on, that sneaky feeling thing of I'm missing something. Another thing that often confuses people in Koha at the beginning, it certainly confused me, is I look in the bibliographic record and I think, okay, it's got a load of fields in it. So there's going to be a table, isn't there, in Koha called, I don't know, biblio fields. And I'm going to be able to go in there and I'm going to be able to say, select field 260 or publisher from biblio fields. Obviously there would be, wouldn't there? But actually there's not, because the way the bibliographic data is stored in Koha is it's actually stored in an XML document that looks a little bit like that, but it's all in one single field of a table. So the field name is metadata and the table name is biblio metadata. So when I'm confronted with that, and perhaps I want to extract just the 245, the title, well, the normal sort of syntax of MySQL, select metadata from biblio metadata, isn't going to do me any good because I'm going to get a massive long string like that. So there's a special function called extract value, which we spend some time looking at. And it basically uses a syntax called XPath, which allows you to sort of navigate the path of the XML, as it were, in order to pull out a particular bit or bits of the biblio metadata. So for example here, if I want to just take out the 245A, which is kind of the main title, then I use this thing here. And you remember before I told you about parameters and the comma. So there's 2 parameters in that extract value function. The first parameter is what field name are we looking at, which, as I've just said, is metadata. And the second parameter, which we spend a little bit more time looking at, is this XPath thing, which is effectively saying, dive down and find the 245. And when you found the 245, find the A, the subfield A that's in that. That's all I want. But there are various nuances there that you can do slightly more fancy things where you want the whole field or other fields, etc. So then we come on to the holy grail of advanced MySQL and the thing that always scares people, which are joins. Because you're not going to get really very far if you just concentrate with one table. It's all very well saying select barcode from items. That's easy peasy. But very soon you're going to be wanting to select from multiple tables and getting behind the power of what the relational database is all about, these links between different tables. And that's where we get to joins. Now, joins can be very scary. I certainly don't think I've got a 100% understanding of joins, and I've been doing this a long, long time. There are different types of joins. So you've got, for example, one of them is called an inner join. And these two circles represent two different tables. So, you might have one table called biblios, which is the title on the left, one table called items on the right, and that blue bit in the middle is the inner bit of them. And you want to sort of pull out things where there are items attached and put those together. But there are also things called left joins, which is the left table, and right joins, which are the right table. And you can go pretty mad with this. And of course, you can join multiple tables, not just two as well. So we sort of have a look at it. But the way I present it is to say, in my experience, there are ways of doing this that avoid having to get too complicated with it, but know that you're not going to start hiding things and not retrieving things that you should be retrieving. So there are little tricks that I've come up with or learned really from other people over the years. So one of them is that I generally stick with a left join. Left is good. Left is good, right is not good in this particular respect, at any rate. And then there's also a special, well, it is just really a join, but there's this thing called a self-join, and that is where you join on the same table twice. So an example of this in Koha, which probably you've come across, if you remember the borrower attributes that you have in the borrowers table, so they're often used for things like what course somebody's on, or what department they're in, or any number of different things that a site might use. And you might want to devise yourself a report that says, I want to know the borrower's name, I want to know their card number, I want to know their branch, but I also want to know what course they're on and what department they're on. And as it stands, it's quite difficult to do that in one row, because you want only one row for that person in the report. You don't want two rows. So the way you do that is by using this self-join. And it uses a technique where we basically use an alias. So if with the table in question, in my example, borrower underscore attributes, you can refer to these in MySQL using aliases. So the first time we use it, we say join on borrower attributes A. And then the second time we use it, we say join on borrower attributes B. And by combining these together, and there's a 3 or 4 step thing that I have to go through to do this, you manage to pull out the data you need. You get rid of the duplicates that it produces if you don't join it properly. And then you get yourself a nice report that actually does what you want, which is saying name, card number, course, department, but only one line for the user rather than more than one line for the user. And then we then look at subqueries. So these are subqueries, a query within a query, hence my nice nest of tables there. And this is quite a nice technique that I've found over time is a way of building up complex queries. And the golden rule is here, start with the inner table, the smallest table, the inner query, and gradually work out to what you're trying to build up to. So quite often in the inner query, I will produce a load of, probably loads and loads and loads of rows. But then in the outer query, we can refer to the data that was calculated in the inner query. So it's a slightly different concept than just directly going to the table and saying selecting something from a table. You're selecting something from a query. And you can do funky things with that, like aggregating the information in some way by grouping it or counting it or adding it up if you're looking at sort of acquisitions and budgety type information. So this sort of gives you, when I do it, it sort of shows how queries are being built up from, it makes it much easier to visualize. And quite often I find that when I'm looking at a query that I don't understand, and I just can't understand it, it's because it's just been written in too complicated a way. So I just throw that away. I think, well, I know what they're trying to get to. I know what the sort of fields are going to be on the answer side of the query that the customer perhaps wants. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do this again and start from this inner query and work out until I come to what we're actually trying to achieve, basically. And then finally, really to look at some of the local requirements. This is really a bit more of a sort of feedback thing that I've found as I've been going around and about and doing the training. Because I do a lot of the work I do in the data side of things, that I'll be answering calls. So you put a call in saying, oh, this report doesn't work, or we need a report to do X, Y, and Z. And I just wanted to feed back really that I found it really quite interesting being in the room where I've been training a number of different people, including perhaps the person who puts in the support calls, who might be, the go-to SQL person and has some MySQL knowledge already, but also with the librarians that come in as well, because very often what we find, I think, is because we're not on the site, we don't understand the business of the site that's being run. I can write you a report and the report does what you've asked, but it doesn't necessarily answer the real question or the real problem in your site that you're trying to resolve. So I found it really useful just seeing the librarian saying, well, no, because somebody such and such has done it like this and we can't find their data. And I can say, oh yeah, well, I'll tell you how you can find their data. You do this. So I'm just sort of throwing that out there really, as I don't know how we do this, as an idea for almost like, combining my knowledge of SQL and the sort of technical side with the knowledge of the person who puts in the calls, but the knowledge of the people on the site who are doing the business and have various actual problems that they just want to solve so they can, run the library better, really. So yeah, sometimes we've done this kind of consultancy thing where you just sort of spend a few hours literally sitting around the table. It's not as much doing SQL as really understanding your data problems and how they manifest themselves out in the world that you live in as librarians, rather than I live in as, behind the support help desk, for example. So yeah, I hope that gives you a sort of bit of a taste to a few things that can be done.